There's a lot of focus right now on police brutality, which we all agree is terrible, and we don't want to see that happen. But there's been some people that have been like, really mean or really aggressive against police and kind of put every police officer in the same bucket. And I don't think that's helpful. I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's fair, right? So I wanted to sit down with a cop, which I did. His name is Brock. And just get to know his reality, understand what his life is like as a cop that just wants to keep citizens safe, right? That just wants to help out citizens, but also himself is governed by law, right? And highly scrutinized. And so he told me a lot of things that I didn't know about being a cop in the U.S. And I think it's super valuable to hear from people like that are in the field, that are doing the job. Like what is their reality actually like? And so I'm grateful that Brock, who is married to one of my team members, was willing to sit down with me and talk with me, and so I could learn. And I'm excited to share it with you so you can learn too. We each have our own gift to give, and yours is unique. What reality you want to create? It's your choice, always. No one can take that from you.
I'm just here to hear your story and your perspective and your experience with everything that's happening right now. So,
right.
Yeah. But like that trip out to you guys, and you took me out shooting guns in the desert, right?
Mm.
Was like first time I've ever experienced that. Like I grew up in Denmark, and like we don't have, like, nobody has a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I think what was so eye-opening for me was just like the way that you operate around guns, and like that is just like, I really got that, like, hey, a good person with a gun is actually a really good thing, right? So it was definitely a moment for me.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things is, everyone should have a healthy fear of guns. They are a dangerous instrument, just like a table saw or anything else. There's a potential for danger there. And, instead of hiding from them, I was brought up to respect and know as much about them as possible so that you know how to be safe around them. It's just a different mindset, whether you're going to avoid them altogether or, learn enough to control them and use them correctly.
They won't let me here in New York.
Yeah.
Well, they won't let me have one anyway. Yeah.
I think you're still allowed in New York to have a harpoon gun, though, if you want a CO2 powered harpoon gun.
Okay. Awesome. Let me try that. All right, I want to know how you're feeling and how this period has been for you.
Well, I mean, it's definitely been not something I thought I was going to go into. My journey to be a police officer was a long one. It took me from the moment I decided to get into law enforcement to the moment I put on my first badge was probably 6 years. And, one of my reasons for doing it is I was a mechanic before, and I always felt like I was getting asked to work in that gray area of life, somewhere between screwing over the customer for charging him too much to, doing the right thing. There was always that weird, section. So when I left,
that was your managers were asking you to do unethical things with regards to the customers?
And the justification was like, it wasn't, we weren't overcharging people. We were trying to get the most out of the corporation, out of under warranty. So charge the company more for your time to optimize it. And sometimes, I could get behind it because of justifications. And sometimes I was just like, this doesn't sit with me right. If you want it done, you're going to have to find another mechanic to do it. And so when I left, I really wanted to have a job that my kids would look up to, and, and I could be an example for my kids. And so, I mean, that has been in the back of my mind this entire time. And now, surprisingly, we're entering into a time where kids are going to be, I don't know if you heard like that Lego is going to pull, police.
I saw that as a Dane. I'm like, what the fuck, guys? Yeah.
So I think that got stopped. I'm not sure, but we're at a time where, you're not supposed to think that police officers are, someone to look up to anymore. They're, oppressive and whatnot. And I just kind of like, I just don't want my kids to buy into that narrative. That's not who I am. That's not why I joined. And that's not what I think that this organization's about,
Right. I mean, it sounds like you joined for the exact opposite reason. Like, I mean, the story you told about being a mechanic, and you're like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, my mother-in-law put the idea in my ear, and I joined the National Guard to kind of get my ears wet and find if I liked the structure and whatnot. Because before that, I had never really given much thought to being a police officer. Once I joined the military, once I went to basic, once I got deployed, I really knew that this was what I was supposed to be. And I don't know, I guess I don't like bullies. And I always kind of realized growing up that whoever the bully was like the person that I always tried to kind of undermine, I guess, I was a small kid for a long time, but at least verbally try to get the bully to go away kind of thing. So, I mean, that's hopefully what law enforcement should be. I mean, we stand in the way of, people that can't defend themselves. That's the point.
Right. That is the point, right? Yeah. Otherwise, the strongest, or the best armed wins.
Right. Yeah.
So what has it been like for you, like, especially these past several weeks with everything that's happening? Like, did you feel a change in your relationship with the community over this?
I have. And honestly, I mean, it's to law enforcement. I mean, it's to everyone's detriment. But I've noticed that on calls, the attitude of people have changed towards us as far as being more disrespectful, more confrontational. And, that's going to lead to more confrontations, honestly, I mean,
in what way are people being confrontational? What does that look like?
I've gone to a call where a man said he walked by another man, and he heard that man, after he passed by, he heard that man what sounded like cocking of a gun. And then he said, he pointed it at me. And I said, did you see the gun? And he's like, no, I didn't see the gun, but I know he pointed it at me. Well, unfortunately, that's not valid reason for me to arrest somebody for not seeing something, right. Just having that sixth sense of knowing. And I was trying to explain this to him, and and he said, oh, well, that's because that guy's white, isn't it? If he was, Mexican or black, you would have already arrested him. Mm-hmm. No, I would still have to, more evidence than that, So just little things like that of people now are playing quarterback and judging every decision they see us do through, a racist lens. Right off the bat. I went to another one where the report came in that she was, a woman was physically assaulted and ran out of apartment. The guy caught her and dragged her back into the apartment. And when we got there, she answered the door. She lied. She said, nothing happened. I was just talking on my phone. And, we were saying, like, listen, we need to deal with this. She wouldn't let us check the house for the boyfriend or for the man. We're assuming it was a boyfriend. And first thing out of her mouth was, you can't come in, but I know you're going to force your way in anyway because you're one of those corrupt police officers that I've seen on the news. Mm. And, it's like, listen, we're here to help you. You were the one assaulted. She had, she had bruises hadn't formed yet, but she had redness on her body and everything like that. And we're here to keep you from getting hurt. And, you, the victim, is now insulting us, saying that, we're the bad guys and we're going to corruptly, violate your freedom. And so, obviously as police officers, we need to work with the community and we're here to protect. And now, even if the victims don't have faith in us because of the news, it's just going to impede investigations, which kind of fuels the problem. If they don't help us with the investigation, then we can't bring the guilty party to justice. So then they say, well, see, they didn't help me at all. They're worthless. Mm-hmm. Well, for us to help you, you have to be cooperative. There's no other way. If you're going to deny that he's in the house or deny anything, then how can we help you? Right. So,
So what do you think? What do you think actually happens in that situation? Is she afraid that if she lets you in, then like her boyfriend's going to harm her, or like
more probably because she knows we'd arrest him and she wants to protect him. Maybe he's, the sole provider of income, or maybe she's
Right.
just delusionally in love with him, even though it's an abusive relationship.
I mean, that touches on this notion that I've heard people talk about, like that cops end up being sort of social workers a lot of the time.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, especially if it's a domestic incident, they call us because they want that altercation to stop, but they don't want any consequences. They don't really want us to
Right.
arrest their brother or their, the wife
Yeah.
or the husband. They want us to be there so they stop, fighting them, and they get a talking to. But then they don't want anything more than that. And unfortunately, at least in where I'm at, that's not the law. Once law enforcement has evidence that a domestic altercation happens, domestic would be between spouses or any kind of sexual partner, family member, even a roommate if you've lived with them for a substantial period of time. So any of those things, once we are alerted to it and once there's evidence of it, it's the state that prosecutes, not the individual. So she can say I don't want, or he can say I don't want to press charges, and we're saying that's irrelevant. You're not pressing charges. The state is pressing charges. So then they get upset, because again they don't want their wife to get arrested. They don't want their husband to get arrested.
Mm-hmm. And if you were to like turn a blind eye in that situation,
I'd probably
like, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they're pretty strict policy on it. There'd be an investigation, and ultimately I could lose my job over it. So
how does that whole internal like police investigation work? Like if you did something wrong, right?
They take it pretty seriously. Any complaint, any written complaint, anytime a citizen comes into the police department or calls and makes and requests to make official complaint, there is 100% of the time an investigation on that. Sometimes
who does that investigation?
Internal investigations. There's a whole division of it.
Internal affairs, is that the thing that it's called, or is it in the movies that it's called, or I don't know.
We just call them IA, but I'm sure that's what it stands for. Yeah. So
and are they local to you guys, or are they like state, or are they somewhere else?
We have one inside our department, which would deal with minor infractions.
How big is your department? How many cops there?
It's slotted for, I believe, around 85 officers, and about 45 to 50 of those are patrol officers. The rest would be made up of detectives and canine and traffic units, specialty units like that. So
how many IA people?
Generally, I would say it's a group of around 3 or 4 people, and they usually do the job for a few years, and then it gets moved to somebody else.
It's like, does it rotate? So like these are people who used to be like
patrol
or like
Mm-hmm. It doesn't rotate like no one gets assigned it. It's a specialty task that you have to do another interview for, and another application fee, and to move to that position. So there's a whole nother screening process for that.
And what's you as a patrol cop, I'm assuming, then, and what's your relationship with IA? Are they like, is it like, because you see in the movies like, oh, these fuckers, like, that kind of thing, like, what is that dynamic like?
Well, I mean, you understand that they have a job and that I don't think any of us have ill will towards them, but at the same time, yeah, I think you guard yourself of what you say and do when they're walking around the hallways, for sure.
Right, yeah.
So I've been investigating, like one official investigation on myself, and then one that almost turned into investigation. Both were, well, I guess the first one was unfounded, and the second one, I'm sure I can talk about it, is I parked at the wrong spot at the hospital responding to a call.
Oh, wow.
So just to show you, how seriously they take it.
That becomes an internal investigation?
Right, because I was responding to a call. I parked not in the handicap, but next to the handicap spot, and then I rushed in to go help out. Well, I end up being there for maybe 2 hours while we were dealing with this person inside, and one of the staff claimed that I shouldn't be parking close to the handicap spot. So there was an entire investigation about it, which I did too. I'm like, yeah, I parked there, but guess what? There was an emergency inside the hospital. I can park anywhere I want when there's an emergency going on to the hospital. Their argument was, after the initial emergency was over, I should have moved my vehicle. True enough, I was basically really reprimanded. Said next time, move your car after and that was pretty much it. But that's a pretty small deal, but investigation, yeah.
And are there, I'm just curious, are there a particular kind of type of person that would be attracted to an IA type role?
I think so. Generally, when you go to the police academy, they teach you two sides of the law. There's the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. So, the letter of the law obviously is very rigid, adheres to, penal codes and whatnot. And then the spirit of the law is kind of, okay, yes, the law was broken, but what's the right thing? What's the moral side of the aspect to do? And as a police officer, you're not supposed to adhere to one or the other, but do your best to walk the line. Fulfill the justice of the written law, but you are allowed a human aspect to it. Use it wisely. And I think people that are attracted to the IA realm would probably be people closer that adhere to the letter of the law and, tightly what's right and what's wrong.
I can see that being a massive source of conflict then, right? And so then, I would assume that someone like your response would be then to make sure you lean more closely towards the letter of the law just to cover your own ass, even though it might not be the morally right thing to do.
Yeah. And, luckily our department, I do work with a lot of great people, and the atmosphere is one of helping each other and of learning. And when mistakes are made, they expect you to be honest about it, but it's not how, this is how we're going to screw you over. It's, okay, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do to fix it. Let's start fixing it, So I do enjoy my police department, where I feel that the people above me are not looking to screw me over, are looking to make me a better police officer. Which was something different than I was a reserve officer in California for 3 years. And although I was just a reserve officer and never out on my own, the feeling I got was sink or swim. I felt like I was thrown out into patrol, and they wanted to see if I could make it on my own or I would fail. And anytime I talked to anybody, it felt like a test to see if I could make the cut. Where when I moved to this department, everyone was, even on training, everyone was like, if you have any questions, even if you don't know what to write, here's my phone number. You're out on a call, you don't know what to do, call us. We'll help you, we'll talk you through it. My immediate supervisor is a sergeant. I have his number. If there's any question on what to do, I take a moment, I let the other officers stand by, whoever. I go back to my car, I'll call my sergeant, say this is what I got, and they can help me through it if I had any questions. We also have a pretty good relationship with the city attorney. So if there are any, this would be more of a not on the spot thing, but if there was any questions, or maybe we did something but we weren't sure about it, the sergeant will email or call the city prosecutor and our own internal attorney and say, whether it was right or wrong. So there's definitely some oversight.
Yeah. So that's it sounds good. You said city attorney, city prosecutor. That's the same person. How does that work?
Yeah. So it's funny. A lot of people don't understand that they can't. A civilian can't press charges, and neither does law enforcement. The only person that actually charges somebody is the city attorney. So we build a case about it, and we might arrest them for it. But all that gets sent to the city attorney, and the city attorney decides whether they're going to prosecute on it. And we also have, like I said, a lawyer that for the department as well that works with the city prosecutor on certain laws and interpreting the law.
Right. And I mean, that's something that I've heard a lot is like, you know, cops saying that, well, we arrest these people and then we send them over to the prosecutor and then they're just released and nothing happens. And that gets frustrating.
It is. It is. You know, and there's, you know, I guess like we were talking about as far as letter of the law and spirit of the law. You know, I don't know all the ins and outs of being a city attorney or prosecutor, but it sounds like they have a lot more freedom to pick and choose what laws they're going to enforce and what laws they're not going to enforce. You know, if whether they feel that they can win the case, you know, maybe that's a big determination whether they're going to even try to prosecute on a person, whether, you know, whether the case was egregious or not. But they definitely, you know, just an example, in the state of Arizona, marijuana is still a felony. However, they'll only charge them for a felony if it's over 2 pounds.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. So that rarely comes up. So, you know, I mean, the law says...
I guess people know that too, right? So they make sure to keep it under that limit.
Well, yeah. I mean, I understand that basically once you're at the 2 pound range, most likely you're a dealer. And, you know, that's why they're going after that person. Right. So, you know, I guess they have the latitude to, you know, pick and choose, even though it's on the books for state law that it's a felony, that they are only going to charge it as a misdemeanor, and you can make that.
That's interesting, right? Like that is like, it's such a really powerful role, actually. It's an elected official, right? There's an election for prosecutor.
That I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
No. But because I mean that is like, there's a lot of power there, right? And what gets prosecuted, not. Like, so you guys still have to arrest someone for minor, smaller amounts of marijuana?
Well, because we have been instructed that by the city, we have been given the latitude to cite and release for the misdemeanor charge.
So is that a fine or? What is the citation? What is that exactly?
So the citation would be for the use of the drug, and it would have a date for their court appearance.
Got it. Yeah.
And so basically, you know, if I arrest somebody, I take them to jail. They go see the judge the next day. The judge, you know, gives an initial hearing, and after they see the judge, you know, most likely they can contact a bail bondsman and post bail until the trial, the official trial. When I cite somebody, basically we skip all that process. I cite them and give them a court date, and then they're supposed to show up for that court date to see the judge for that trial. So it really just mitigates them from being in jail for that month until their court date. So
a month? Like, wait. You said normally you set them, like they'll see the judge the next day.
If they're arrested, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so that's the step that you're skipping by just doing a citation, but they still have to show up in court.
Right.
And they don't have to post bail.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. So I'm wondering, like, when this George Floyd thing happened, what were your feelings, and what was the atmosphere in your department?
You know, I think I remember viewing it on my way to work, you know, and I didn't quite watch the entire video. I think a lot of on Facebook, a lot of it had it, you know, like blocked or, you know, only for 18 or older. So I didn't watch it, I don't think, in its entirety for a few days afterwards. You know, I just heard the narrative that, you know, he was stepping on the guy's neck, and that the guy died from it. So, and then, you know, of course, the narrative of it being racially motivated, which, you know, is entirely a possibility. I don't know the guy. I don't know the other guy. I just don't like how it's immediately jumped to that because the officer is one color and because the person's the other color, it must be because of that, you know?
Right.
People are way more complicated than that. And I think later on it kind of proved that, because I heard that they worked together as bouncers at a bar. So there wasn't a relationship, you know? So maybe they didn't get along. Maybe they hate each other. Maybe that was the motivation rather than race. We don't know. Right. I'm totally open to investigation and to look at that as a possibility, but not to label it immediately just for news, you know, likes. Yeah. So as far as the atmosphere around the department, I mean, everyone that I talked to was ashamed and, said that was wrong and it was going to be wrong and that he was most likely going to, get arrested for it. The only really part of the clip that I watched was the guy when he was saying, he couldn't breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's kind of a saying that, if you can talk, you can breathe, because obviously air's coming out. Now, I'm sure he was panicking, and rightly so. And I've heard that there's been 3, autopsies, so I haven't even heard of the total conclusive, ending to all that of what his cause of death was. But definitely what he did was wrong. And, I've gone to 2 academies, one in California, one in Arizona, and that's not something that's taught. And in fact, that's something that they teach against, that at times when you're going up to somebody to put the handcuffs on them, you can rest your not your knee, but your shin, I would say, from their shoulder to basically, the small of the back. And they tell you, be careful not to put your leg or your body weight on somebody's throat, or, even if it's the back of the neck, because you could cause damage or break their spine. If, some cops are kind of overweight and heavy, and they could really hurt somebody. So you're supposed to keep all of the weight on the balls of your feet, and then, rest your leg on the person while you're handcuffing them. And what that does is it kind of uses your leg as a tuning fork. So as the person struggles or moves, you can feel where their body's going and act accordingly, whether they're trying to flip to the left, flip to the right, a way to feel it so you can act upon it, and also hold them down while you're trying to use both your hands to put the person in handcuffs. But there's nothing in either police department or police academy that I've gone to where they teach that as a viable, tactic to sit there. And I've dealt with, a lot of people were talking about excited delirium, which has killed people in the past. And it's where a person handcuffed because of drugs or mental illness or anything else in their system, they panic and they have a heart attack and die. And it's not really because of what the officer did. It's more because, again, of them being confined, the confinement, and their heart beating out of control. It's called excited delirium. And we've learned about that in both academies. And a step you take is to, try and calm them down and put them in a recovery position, which would allow them to not have any weight on their chest so they can breathe freely, And, and I've dealt with that. I've dealt with that probably in the past month. I had a chase where after I caught the guy, I put handcuffs on him, and as soon as I turned him over, he was passed out and foaming out the mouth, and, first thing you do is, like I said, you lay him on his side, and you move his legs and arms in a way that optimizes their breathing. Obviously, we called the paramedics, and then I just, we talked with them. I called another officer over who has Narcan, which is a drug that helps if the guy was overdosing from drugs, brings him back. He administered Narcan. The guy started to come out of it, and we talked with him until paramedics arrived. And now he did, as soon as he came out of it because of the Narcan, he immediately started fighting. He immediately started thrashing his body, kicking, and it took maybe 3 officers to hold him in place. But again, we just tried to keep him on his side and tried to keep him comfortable. Tell him, hey, please don't struggle. The paramedics are going to come here and check you out. Be nice to them. So, I think what the officer did is just, of just sitting there for, how many minutes was not something that law enforcement teaches, and not something that all law enforcement should be judged on either. I mean, we got to remember that people are individuals. Everyone's an individual. And, we have no idea what's going on in anyone's head, what their motivations are. There's a huge screening process for police officers, but you never know that when that police officer is dealing with a divorce or dealing with kids or dealing, with financial issues, and then he has somebody in front of his face disrespecting him, or somebody attacks him, whether that's the day that this perfect storm, meets, and then that officer snaps and goes too far and abuses his authority. Was that an indication that he was a bad person? Was it an indication that it was a momentary lapse in judgment? I can't make that call, but we should be looking at a lot more factors than what we do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that was the thing that made me so sad about that, right? Like, for 2 days, everybody were united in agreement that this is bad,
Yeah.
and that's not the kind of thing that we want to see. And then people jump to this, and like I think probably driven a lot by media, right? That it's got to be, but I mean, the media is tapping into something, but like it's got to be racially motivated, which
Yeah.
there's zero evidence for that. It may have been, right? It may well have been. Who knows?
It will have been. Yeah.
But it doesn't seem like it makes it any easier to solve.
Yeah.
What's your ethnicity, if you don't mind?
I'm a mutt.
Mud. Yeah.
I would say my mom is Mexican with a lot of its Spanish blood, and my dad is predominantly Italian with some French Canadian in there, and then a dash of a lot of other stuff. I would assume, but generally when people ask me, what I am, I usually just tell them I'm an American. That's my ethnicity.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can't rally behind that as a people, then, I mean, if you study history, like the fall of Rome and everything, it's when a civilization loses its identity and can't rally around their own citizenship, they crumble. And I think that's where we're headed,
Yeah. We both have the American flag in the background.
Yeah.
It's so interesting for me as a foreigner, right? As a Danish citizen, to come here and see that sort of like, even the fact that like having the American flag is like, or showing the American flag has become divisive, right? It's like,
yeah.
crazy.
I've heard people say, even as far as professors and schools have taken the American flag down and saying it's oppressive. I'm like, how are you a teacher and you call the flag oppressive when they tell you what the flag means, what the 13 stripes mean, what the red means, what the white means, what the blue means. None of it means oppression. You might have associated it with it, but who gets to judge what something is? The people who made it and designed it, or you who just has an opinion of it,
Right.
At least give a benefit of the doubt, and you can say, just like any culture in the history of any nation, there's no one that stands without incident. No nation that has lived a virtuous life from this foundation and has just been this peaceful entity. Every country has this dark past of atrocities, but I wouldn't represent the United States as a whole as being a dictatorship that have oppressed other people. I would consider it the opposite of a nation that has, uplifted more countries than any other. So,
yeah.
But like I said, but I'm not blind to the fact that, the United States has its flaws, that we've hurt people, we've done horrible things, and, part of that falls on me as a citizen to take that blame. I'm not leaving this country, so I need to accept the blame,
Right. Yeah. I want to touch on, I want people to, here's like, I wanted people to connect with what it feels like to be a cop in this climate when this stuff happens, right? Like, have you like every day you go out there and your life is literally at risk, right? Every day something might happen.
Yeah.
That could threaten your life. Is that fair? Is that true?
Yeah, there's a possibility. I try not to leave the door, angry. I try not to leave the house after fighting with my wife or having a big discussion before I leave, because I don't want, the last conversation me and my wife or kids have to be on a negative note. So that definitely is a thought, when I leave the house every day.
I get tears in my eyes. That touches me. Yeah. Has that gotten worse during this period with?
No, I mean, obviously, I mean, Deanna, she's a special girl. We have a good relationship, and if the worst were to happen, I know she would deal with it. Obviously, I'm happy that my parents are together and that they would be there to support her as well as her parents. And it's not something we've really sat down and talked to until recently. It's definitely been a thought in our heads. She's worried that basically I'm going to not do my job because of fear of being labeled a racist or or getting arrested, and
Tell me
then
about that.
that's going to lead to my death. Just, we were talking about the two officers that shot the gentleman with the taser,
Hmm.
and she was just saying, again, that she was worried that, if in those kind of situations that I would hesitate
Hmm.
to protect myself because I would be scared that I would, be on trial for murder, and she would hate to put the kids through that, as far as seeing, their dad, who has been all their life trying to teach them right from wrong, and now their dad's, being put on trial for murder for trying to do his job. So I think that's honestly, I think when you talk to police officers, that's probably a bigger fear for police officers. I think a police officer has less of a fear of putting their life on the line for citizens, and more of a fear of going to jail and having to be put away with all the people that they helped put there. You know, because I'm sure, not every cop that's been arrested gets murdered in jail, but I'm sure they live with the constant fear that, someone's going to hurt them while they're there.
Mm. That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, but that makes sense. One of the things that I've heard, and I did let me know if there's truth to this, is like as a cop these days, you're more likely to actually pull your punches, as it were, when it comes to a black person, because there's that fear that, like, if you do something wrong there, it might be get blown up.
Oh, for sure.
Versus, yeah.
I definitely feel that. And now where I am, the black population is very small. I would say maybe 100 or 200 people.
Okay.
They're definitely not the bulk of the people I come in contact with. Generally, it's white, Hispanic is the predominant races in the city. But definitely on the occasions that I have dealt with black people, that always is in the back of your head. How is this going to be looked at by other people? And in one such instance, there was a gentleman who he shoplifted. He stole from a store. Definitely, I didn't know this at the time until I kind of spoke with him, but he definitely had some mental illness going on. He wasn't right in the head. I came across him at a park, walking from where he stole from, and I was just trying to talk to him until other officers showed up, because this guy probably had 100 pounds on me. He was a big kid, probably in his early 20s. And I was nervous because as I'm dealing with him, I noticed a park table, a basketball court next to a park table right around there. And most of the people playing basketball were black. And so I noticed them all watching. I noticed them coming and getting closer as I'm just talking to this guy, thinking that, because I'm talking to this guy, at least this is, my own impression. I don't know their hearts. I don't know what they were thinking. But I was wondering in the back of my head, are they thinking that I'm harassing this guy? Are they thinking that, I'm going to abuse this guy, And eventually the guy said, no, I'm leaving, and tried to run away. Now I had to try to stop him. Again, he was probably 100 pounds on me, and I was able to keep him in place and, kind of keep him from going anywhere else until another officer showed up. And, of course, as soon as we touched the guy, other people came closer and, made some comments of, that what we were doing was wrong. And, I tried after we had him in handcuffs, we tried calming him down, because again, he did have mental illness. So I don't know how much he was understanding of what was going on. And we were trying to explain it to him, but we were also trying to explain it to the people walking over. Hey, this guy just stole, over $100 worth of stuff. He's not free to go. He's not free to leave. He tried to leave. That's why we put him in handcuffs. If he would have cooperated, if he would have just stood there, the officer would have probably talked with him. The officer coming from the place would have talked with him, and maybe because of his mental illness, wouldn't even have given him a ticket at all. After explaining to the shop owners, hey, this guy's not all the way right. Do you want to prosecute? And if they said no, then we would have just let him go. If they said yes, we would have given him a ticket. The only reason why he had to get put in handcuffs was because he tried to leave the custody of being my detention, of keeping him there. But because of that, because we actually touched him, I saw the crowd forming, and I saw their opinion of me doing something wrong just because of the colors of both of our skins.
So yeah, does that level of scrutiny and that like thought going through your mind of like how this would play make you a better cop, or does it make it harder to do your job properly?
I think it does make us a better cop because, I mean, some officers don't like body cams. Some officers love body cams because, it offers protection as well as evidence against you, And either way, it definitely makes you more aware of your actions. And I think, I think as officers, we should be. It might not be the comfortable thing. It might not keep my mind at ease, but, that's not the job I signed up for. So, it's fine that people are scrutinizing. It's fine that I get filmed by people's, phones. Hopefully they play the entirety of the video and not chop it up to make it look like I'm the bad guy. But I think as police officers, we have moved from more. I mean, I was just watching an episode of Cops from the 70s, with my oldest son, Silas. And, the first sign that the guy was non-compliant, the officer, grabbed his throat, threw him down on the ground, put handcuffs on him. And I kind of went back. I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have done that for what he did.
Right.
So I think, we have moved away from being a presence of physical dominance to what we would call verbal judo and using our words to get what we want rather than our physical force. We still have that physical force if needed, but as an organization, we've moved away from that being our first step and more in the trying to talk people out. And I enjoy that. That's actually the I think I tell my wife that's the funnest part of the job. When I arrest somebody, drop them off at the jail, and they thank me for it. They're like, "Thank you, officer. I appreciate it." And I take that like that. I just took away your freedom. I just and now you might go to jail for a while, and you've just thanked me for what I did. To me, that's a satisfaction from the job of, and
Yeah.
also
Why do they thank you in that situation?
generally because I guess I view it as the criminal, oddly enough, is kind of like a coworker. They're part of the job, and you work with them. And when the handcuffs are on and the danger's over, I treat them, like a person. I don't belittle them, even if they're done something horrible, horrendous, or rape or child molestation. It's internally I'm thinking this guy's a piece of something, but externally I'll still say please and thank you when I take him to the cell. Will you please step in there? Thank you. Take off the handcuffs. All right. Thank you for for not being belligerent. Thank you for not being giving me a hard time. Thank you for telling me the truth if they told me what actually happened. So generally I think that's why they'll thank me, because I've treated them like a person instead of a criminal for that time.
Yeah. What about the people resisting arrest? Like that seems to be like a thing that more often than not causes conflicts. Like
yeah, well,
more so than.
I mean, even them. I've been assaulted before, and generally I might not talk with them as much. We have a voice recorder I'll turn on, and I'll still be polite to them. I mean, like I said, they're in handcuffs. The danger to me is
right. No, I mean, yeah, I think more interesting, like what I'm thinking is like that, like if people just across the board would just stop resisting arrest,
yeah,
like how much of the problem would that solve right there?
I would say at least 90% of the problem it would go away.
Right. Right.
I mean, there is. I mean, again, I don't have rose-colored glasses to where I think every police officer is perfect. We wish they were. We want them to be. But at the end of the day, they're humans. Are there bad people that slip through the cracks? There are. The police department takes huge steps to mitigate that with background checks, psych evals, several interviews, but there are always going to be bad apples in the bunch. We should always work to having that number at zero with the knowledge that it's never going to be zero. You're never going to be, we're never going to be perfect.
Yeah. So on that note, like how would you rate how well you're doing, and like what's the sort of the next thing that needs to happen to bring that number further down?
I think, it would be good to have officers have a counselor at a full-time counselor at the police department, and not a position where, you go in when when you're feeling low, but like it has to like scheduled from the get-go where like,
Right.
every month, you have a scheduled appointment with a counselor, just so that you have that oversight of somebody having knowledge of your personal life. Because a lot of times officers, do keep people out of their business. Like I had a coworker who's going through a divorce. I didn't know until the divorce was finalized that he was going through issues with his wife. So that might not be something he wants to share with his brothers, but maybe with a counselor, with a department, they could divulge that stuff, and then that counselor can make a determination without compromising, even what has to be said. Just say, hey, this person, is going through stuff. It might not be the best time for this person to be, working the gang unit right now because he's a little amped up and he has a lot of stuff going on in his personal life, or, maybe he's had a family member that just died, So with that role might help at least those officers that, snap because of everything going on in their life.
Right.
I mean,
I think
the alcoholic rate for police officers is super high. The domestic violence rate for police officers are high. The suicide rate for police officers are high. The cancer rate for police officers are high. So, there's a lot of things going on that officers live with stress 24/7.
Right. Have you thought, like, have you personally or people that you know of in the profession, like rethinking the wisdom of being a cop these days? Like the pay is not phenomenal and like people are really pissed, and
Well,
you're kind of being lumped together a lot of times, right? Like all cops are bad, like that whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, again, I know my family knows the truth and knows what I do and why I do it. And, that's a motivation for me to stay above board, other than the fact that just my parents instilled that in me and my faith in God. But I think a lot of the officers, I haven't heard of any officers from my department that are quitting over this. However, at this time, it feels like our city has our back. I don't hold it against any officer in those cities where their governments has totally thrown them under the bus. And I would imagine if my city did that and took actions, if my city came out and said that they were going to defund the police officers and eventually we're all going to get removed, I'd probably quit the next day. Because this profession can't work without the people above us, having our backs and protecting us. Because police officers need protection too. We need protection from people, telling us that what we did is right, and protecting us when we're on that line, because we're not civilians and we do have authority that they don't have, and we have, and anybody can quarterback it and say, you shouldn't have used nightstick. You should have used, pepper spray, or you should have done this. You should have done that. But, when somebody's
I'm imagining like the support of the community as well, right? I mean, you can't do your job without their cooperation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and I should say that we did have, we didn't have any riots. We did have protesters out on the main city corners with signs and yelling things. And I actually also had people come up to me and, sometimes they'll motion to me while I'm in my patrol vehicle to roll the window down. And sometimes I'm like, okay, what are they going to say? But like the last one, said, we support you. We love you. I drove by those protesters and I flipped them all off. How dare they say that about our police? And I'm like, well, I appreciate that. Please don't flip them off, because I don't want them to like rush you or assault you. But, I do appreciate your support.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
because I mean, that's something that I hear also when it get like back to the racial thing, right? Where like in blacks neighborhoods, they're told that cops are bad, and then like you're not gonna help the cops actually police the area and keep crime out.
Yeah, Yeah, I definitely think it's a cultural thing to distrust the police officers, and I'm not saying it's not backed in facts. Again, when you see reports of officers in the 70s and 80s and sure the 90s and even today, there are officers that have harassed black citizens, and again, but even blatant harassment, I would want to look at all the factors. Does this police officer I was talking with a coworker. Again, I'm in the National Guard, and one of my good friends is a black man in the National Guard who serves with me. And he was talking about, times where a black person walks through a white neighborhood and gets stopped by the police. I've never seen that or experienced that. Again, we don't really have a black neighborhood in my town, though. There's not a central location for them. They live anywhere. But I haven't heard of that. I have police officers in major cities in California, and I've never heard of that. With that being said, I told him, even if that's true, what are the factors? Did he stop that gentleman purely because he doesn't like black people? That to me would be blatant racism. Did he stop him because that's an area where drugs are being sold and he looks like somebody who sells drugs and they want to go out and talk with them? I wouldn't say that would be racist, and that might be profiling. But in our in our career, we all do profile to a certain degree. I mean, if I roll up on a case and I see a person who dresses like a gang member, I'm going to assume he's a gang member, to a certain extent. We, as cops, we have to recognize certain indicators of colors of gangs and hand signs, tattoos on their arm. Maybe he was a gang member who reformed and now he's, the neighborhood watch person who's totally turned his life around, but if he has certain tattoos, I'm going to make an assumption. And, should we as a society make assumptions on people? Probably not. Do cops use assumptions to better do their job? They do, when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it's such a crazy thing. Like, of course you do. Like, that's what humans do, and also, like, it would be crazy not to, right? Like again, it's an assumption, but and then you have to verify, right? But like, exactly. if you have to treat every single person like 80-year-old grandmother as like she might be a gang member, you never know, right? Like, it's like she's not very efficient.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. What about one of the other things? I'll let you go soon. I don't know if you have a timeline that you need to.
Oh, no.
To run
as much time as you want.
All right, awesome. Like, I'm enjoying this and learning so much. One of the things I hear is that unions. I heard someone say specifically police unions, like a large part of the code or the whatever it is. I don't know the term here, but is about protecting cops from being sued, investigated, charged, like that kind of thing.
Yes, I mean, I do belong to a police union. There are several different unions. Generally each state has a union, and there's broader ones, a national union as well. Now, part of your dues that you pay to your union do pay for they go towards a lawyer and retention. So, I mean, yes, their job is to protect you to an extent. I mean, right. If I egregiously murder somebody, they're not going to come out and say what I did was right, but they will still send a lawyer to represent me.
That's how our legal system works. It's supposed to work that way, right?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of the dues that I pay for that. Now, they do help in cases, say, even if I do a violation of policy or something like that, like for an internal investigation, I do have the option of calling them, and they will send out somebody to, sit next to me and kind of, walk me through the process of the internal investigation of what I have to say and what I don't. One of the weird things is police officers don't have the right to remain silent. If I'm as a police officer accused of something, I either pretty much have, if I don't speak and tell them everything, tell them everything about it, my option is to quit. The investigation will still happen, but I don't have the option of staying silent and saying, I'm not going to, talk about this. You do your investigation, but I'm not going to say anything. I don't have that option because I'm still an employee. And as an employee, I have to divulge everything, that happened. So yeah, you either cooperate or you quit, but you can't be silent. And anything you say can get used against you, even to the federal degree. So you in those cases where the officer knows he's wrong, and a lot of the times they will quit because they don't want to incriminate themselves in that conversation when it goes to court. So.
Okay. So that's a tell if they quit.
Not always. Not always. They could just be, lose faith. Lose faith in the organization. Actually, I just had a coworker quit, and he had probably 3 internal investigations on him for more of his civilian life. Unfortunately, he didn't do a good job with relationships, and he separated from his wife. So his wife, came to the department and complained on him and said, some things about him that caused an investigation. And then when he left his new girl and went back to his wife, the new girl came into the police department and complained about him. So after that, even though all the complaints were for personal reasons and he was shown to be, that they're unfounded, he felt that the police department as a whole had lost faith in him, and they were looking for his next mistake to fire him. And just feeling that weight over his shoulders of the next time I screw up for anything, they're going to let me go. They're going to use it as an excuse to let me go. He just decided to quit and go somewhere where he, didn't have that bad blood, I guess you would say, or the people thinking of him in a certain way. So, there are instances where officers decide to quit, and it's not because of wrongdoing necessarily.
The defund the police, that whole thing that people are calling for now.
Yeah.
Like, what are your thoughts?
I don't understand. I just don't understand the mindset, and I'm willing to hear and understand. It's not like the criminals are going to take a vacation. Crime is going to go on, and the answer is community policing. But now you're having people do it that aren't trained, that haven't gone through hours, that aren't accountable to people. I just don't see what they actually envision and how it's going to work. And whatever they do come up with, eventually it's going to mutate into the police department. Eventually it's going to mutate into law enforcement. I mean, that's the only way it can go. And so I understand if you have an entirely corrupt organization of police officers, the need to wipe them away and hire new people. But the solution might look different, but it's going to do the same function. So what's the point,
Right.
And
yeah, I've been thinking about that. Like, is it a play to basically like outmaneuver police unions? Because it'd be all the same work, right? You just don't call them police officers anymore, and so it's a different union. Is that the?
Yeah, as far as I understand, they want to replace them with, they don't want police officers with guns to, go to these smaller calls as one of the steps. And we have that. We have non-sworn officers who show, and they wear, a lighter blue uniform, and they don't have a gun on them. They do have a taser to protect themselves, and they used to not have a taser, but one of them got attacked, so now they have tasers. But they would go and they respond to thefts where there's no suspect, even burglaries where there's no evidence. They'll go there and they'll dust for fingerprints. They'll take the statements. They'll get the list of things that were stolen. So we have people like that deal with nonviolent non-crimes. And that helps the police officers, the ones that with the guns, to respond more to the higher priority calls. But if they're not around, we are still obligated to take those calls as well. So they're definitely a help and a benefit to us, and we really appreciate what they do.
Right. Have they improved relationship with the community, or doesn't really make a difference?
I think so. You know, sometimes they'll get attitude. They'll be like, "No, I want a real cop to show up." You know, they don't think they're good enough. Oh, yeah. But they do an excellent job, and their caseload is sometimes higher than us. You know, to where I may take 1 or 2 reports a night. You know, sometimes they'll have like 6 reports in a day. So they work hard, and they don't get the respect that police officers do. So hats off to them.
Right. So some people are saying like that the police, I guess there would be specific police departments, right, that they're rotten to the core, is like one of the things that I've heard. Is that something that you can recognize?
You mean in those departments or my own?
Like yeah. I mean, it doesn't sound like yours is that way at all, right?
Yes. No, I mean, again, you never know. I mean, some people like to climb the ladder for the whole, status of being at the top. Some people are there to serve, and again, we have to look at the individuals. Every department has yearly training. I mean, I guess that's the most offensive thing that I hear when I think of when people say, "Excuse me, all cops are racist." I'm just like, if you only knew how much classes I've had, how many seminars I've gone through, how many web classes I've taken, how many online courses I've done on, treating people with respect, on equality with people, and on just putting kids' gloves on people and mitigating any kind of violence and all this stuff. We have classes on how to be nice to mentally ill people. We have classes on how to be nice to the LGBTQ community. We have classes on minorities. We have classes, on identifying people's needs. And I mean, there's so many things we come across. I mean, just something that maybe you never thought of. I mean, I've arrested a guy with one arm before. How do you put handcuffs on somebody with one arm? It's kind of difficult. So, there's all these different circumstances that come across where you have to work at and not offend the person. You don't want to bring attention. I'm sorry, sir, you have one arm, so I'm going to have to tie a rope around your body so I can handcuff your one arm behind your back. There's just all these things that people could be offended for. But the police department as a whole spends gobs of money trying to give us the tools to do it right. And if you're trying to defund the police department, my only assumption is that money's going to go away on all that instruction to teach us what to do the right thing. Now, obviously, we should know what to do, the right thing. But all the money on training and scenarios to make us better police officers is going to go away. And so you're going to get worse police officers. And is that the point? Is that what you want? Do you want worse police officers? You want to pay cops less so people that are less qualified apply for the job? I just don't see the point.
No. Do cops generally become cops just to harass Black people?
No, no, I don't believe that's the case whatsoever. I mean, and the last academy I went to, we actually had to write an essay on why we wanted to be police officers. And, it's kind of funny, the police officers that wrote the status quo of I want to help people, generally the cadre did kind of laugh at them a little bit. They're like, you will help people at this job. You will help people. But if you think, if you're expecting to get thanked for it, you might as well leave now, because that's not part of our job. You want to be thanked, go be a firefighter is what they say, which I think is funny, because firefighters, and I don't want to hurt any of my firefighter friends' feelings in this, but firefighters, because of their job, probably assault more people than police officers. And no one ever sues a firefighter. Sometimes when the firefighters are trying to help some of these guys, criminals or people on drugs or whatnot, the person gets put in the back of the ambulance and they'll start flailing and trying to punch the firefighter. There's firefighters that will knock the guy out, just punch him and knock the guy out. They don't do a report on it. There's no investigation. They never get, the guy never comes by the next day and says the firefighter punched me in the eye. And it just goes away. But because police officers, we get sent through the ringer, which is kind of humorous. But
Yeah, I know. Your wife told me that you helped fight fires in California also a couple years back.
I did. Yeah, that was an experience in itself. I enjoy the National Guard and what I do there, but I'm definitely glad my normal job is police officer.
Right. Yeah, I just felt like mentioning that because I think a lot of people don't see the sacrifice that someone like you is doing for the community, for the country at large. Like you're really heavily invested into protecting people, right?
Well, if you ask my wife, I mean, and let's not forget the spouses, because I've definitely put my wife through a lot. My first police academy was 10 months long, and Deanna had to basically be a sole parent while I went to class, came home and studied for those classes. Went to class, came home and studied for the classes. She had to, work, raise the children for that almost year by herself to support me. So, it's a family effort for sure. And it is hard. I'll admit it is hard. I mean, I think I've missed more anniversaries than I've made. I've missed more birthdays of hers than I've made. Kids' birthdays, Christmas,
and births, right? Like how many? You have 5 kids, and how many of them did you see get born?
I gotta think about this.
Not all of them, I've heard.
Well, the first one I was deployed, and I got to see via Skype. So they hung a laptop over her, and I got to see that one. I believe I was there for 2 physically, and then I think, maybe 2 out of the 5, maybe 3 out of the 5. I definitely missed 2. We'll say that. So,
because of work obligations, because of National Guard, mainly National Guard, or
the National Guard was because of 2. Then I was there for 2, and then the other one was Skype. So I guess 3 maybe. The last one I was working as a police officer when I had the last one, and she called the department, and I had already talked to my sergeant. Hey, my wife's she's gonna go in labor soon, so as long as I'm not on a call, if I get that call, can I leave? And he said, of course. So I was actually on a home invasion call, and we were just talked to the people out of the home and put them in handcuffs, and then I got the call. So I was like, hey, you got this? You got these guys? And my sergeant's like, yeah, I got them. And so I jumped in the car and took off. So I was able to be there for that one, and that was fun.
Let's hear that. Yeah. Well, how do you and your colleagues look at the bad cops when you see it?
Well, every instance is a learning. We can use it for learning and to teach. So generally, most calls that happen that are videoed, we every day we have a briefing before we go to the street, and so usually the sergeant will bring that video up. We all watch the video, and then we dissect it. We talk. What did he do that was good? What did he do that was bad? What could you have done better? Even if what you did was justified, was there something that would be better, to mitigate the outcry of people, or to help with your safety or whatnot, just an example. I responded to a call where it was a bar parking lot fight, and the suspect had already left. So we were talking with the victim, who was sitting down in the parking lot bleeding, just eye and nose, nothing major. Me and my partner were talking to the girlfriend and to witnesses to find the suspect. I don't know what happened, but this guy who was the victim stood up and walked over, grabbed his girlfriend who was talking to the police officer, grabbed her by the hair and spun her around and threw her to the ground right in front of us. And now he was intoxicated, but I still don't understand the reason for it. Now, the other officer tried to defend the female and grabbed him and tackled him to the ground. And everything the officer did was above bar. However, there was 10 drunk people that were all this guy's family there. So him tackling him and punching him to subdue him and get handcuffs on, totally within policy and okay to do. But was that the smartest thing to do with 10 drunk family members watching? Because those guys, everyone started closing in, hey, get your hands off my brother kind of thing, like that. So even those instances, we talk about, was that the best thing? What could we have done? Should we have used force in that situation? Was there other force we used? So as far as our opinion of these instances, we dissect them. Was this a bad, thing? And if it was, don't do it. So we don't, maybe as officers, we hold our judgment a little longer than the civilian population. When I hear, hey, a cop in so-and-so place, shot this guy for no reason. I hold my judgment a little longer, saying, well, let's listen to the facts. Let's get the whole case before we accuse this officer of being a murderer. And I think we probably all do that. We wait for more facts before making a judgment. But if an officer clearly does something wrong, and there has been times where officers have done something clearly wrong, I've never found an officer that was supportive of that action, And I think that's what frustrates me about this, with the riots and with the people upset. Who are they, the police department are saying it's wrong. The city is saying it's wrong. They're being prosecuted. The public is saying it's wrong. No one is in defense of these officers, of the 4 officers, no one's in defense of it. So who are you protesting against? Why are you burning down, Walmarts and such in protest? Who are you protesting against? You're protesting against this imaginary, canopy of law enforcement are bad, but it's not the case.
Yeah, I mean that's what makes me so sad about that situation too. It's like it doesn't seem like it does anything to help.
And I understand. I mean, during the Rodney King beating, that was a bad thing, and the riots didn't. And I wouldn't condone riots no matter what, But I at least could understand where their head was at, because here these police officers who abused their authority got acquitted and didn't go to jail, and that's what sparked the riots. But in this case, we're not there yet. They are tried. Right. They're he's getting tried for murder.
Right. On that note, so I saw this that the prosecutor upgraded the charge from a 3rd-degree murder to a 2nd-degree murder, which after pressure from the public, which may actually cause the guy to get acquitted. Because there's not evidence, it requires different evidence, right? So right. And then, what actually happened, for 2nd-degree murder, you have to prove intent, is what I understood. Right. And we don't have any evidence that there's intent here, right? Yeah. And so, because of that mob wanting to see a higher sentence, he may get tried for something that he can't be convicted of, and then end up going free. Great job, everybody, right?
Well, and isn't that the whole point of our legal system, to stop mob rule? Right. just because there's a mob outcry doesn't mean that the justice system should bend in any way. They are the establishment. They are that straight line that we need to depend on.
Right. We need to change the laws. Let's change the laws. Let's talk about that, right? Yeah.
The court cannot be swayed by public or by emotion. They need to be steadfast and across the board, giving the same sentence to the same crime for anybody, and so that's unfortunate that they would change that. Now, I don't know, I hadn't heard that, so I don't know if they're thinking because of their prior relationship and because the officer,
well, that might be the case, but
he might be purposely doing this to get back at him, and that's why they're going for it. I don't know the case, but
it would just be terrible if he ends up getting acquitted because the prosecutor overstated the case and then ends up losing it, and then what's going to happen to the world then, right?
And again, it's gonna, I don't know, because I'm hearing off of other people. I haven't researched it myself, so if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But from what I've heard, one of the autopsies said heart attack. One of the autopsies said basically drugs in the system. And the other autopsy was like what I mentioned earlier, excited delirium. But none of them was because of the direct action of him putting,
yeah, that's what I've seen too.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody cares right, in the media, the public, like overall.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I don't feel that we know enough to make his intentions that he intended to murder the guy. What he did definitely led to the guy dying.
Right.
And I don't mean to dismiss him by just referring to him as the guy, Floyd. But yeah, I think we need to pull back a little bit, look at the facts, and not let our emotions guide. And just one thing I did want to talk about is, I mentioned this before all this happened months ago. I was having a conversation with officers because I was researching it for myself, that there are cultural shift in truth and establishing what truth is. And is truth applicable in our profession and culture these days? Because the shift in culture, my parents grew up with absolute truth. There are things that are right and wrong, no matter of the opinion of the culture, and no matter the opinion of the organization. There are things that are right and wrong. That's what I was taught. And just an instance of that is slavery. Slavery is wrong. It doesn't matter that back when slavery was around, they didn't think they were doing something wrong. It was the society believed it was okay. So that's what I would say is a reason why society shouldn't dictate what is right and wrong, because societies change. And you either have to admit that what they did, if you believe that society dictates what right and wrong is, then you would have to let all those people off the hook, because at the time it wasn't wrong to them. It is to us now, and it would be unfair for us to judge that society on them in hindsight. So, and I don't agree with that. I believe that, slavery is wrong across the board, no matter what, in all cultures. Right. So, but the truth, the definition of truth has degraded in today's society. Now it's not what it really is, it's your personal truth. Well, it doesn't matter that, that person didn't hit me. I felt assaulted, and we get that a lot. So I'll have people say, he hit me, he assaulted me, he assaulted me. And, that gives us an elevation in what we're dealing with the person. And maybe we put him in handcuffs or something like that. And then we get to talking with her after she calms down or he calms down. Well, he didn't really hit me. I just felt like he was going to hit me. I felt assaulted by his words. And I'm like, well, that's not the right thing. What actually happened? The truth matters. And today, people aren't worried about the truth anymore. They're worried about their personal truth. And their personal truth is very subject to biases and culture and everything else. And I think that's a shame. And if we don't return to some sort of real definition of truth in our culture, we're going to see some problems, like we're saying.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, because like what you're talking about is people's feelings, right? And like, while people's feelings are a true statement about what they're feeling, they're not a true statement of what's actually happening. Like, you can feel stories like you're walking along a path and in the woods and you see this snake down by the side and you get scared, right? You feel like fear and like panic. And then you realize it's actually not a snake. It's just a piece of rope that's lying there, right? And now you don't feel fear anymore, right? Like, the fear was real, but it wasn't proof that there's a snake there. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're moving away from that, especially on colleges and, places, and that's an argument for these organizations where, they feel, oppressed. They feel that people are being racist against them. And like you said, I'm not debating whether those feelings are real. I'm sure they do feel oppressed. I'm sure they feel like that person's racist against them. But is that the truth? Is it in your head? Or is it in their hearts? And we don't know each other's hearts.
Right.
we all need to extend a little more grace to each other and give them the opportunity to explain themselves. And, if you have, one thing you have to do is, besides leave, to get to the truth, you have to be able to talk about things openly. Mm-hmm. And you have to internalize and say, I'm willing to be wrong. Mm-hmm. If you're not willing to be wrong, you're not going to learn anything. And you're not going to grow as a person. And I think a lot of these groups, they're not willing to be wrong. They've made up their mind. And if you speak against them, you're the enemy. And, I don't think that's any way to grow or to hear, because a lot of times, just in a relationship with my wife, we fight. I think she says something that offends me or is hurtful. And then we talk about it. And I learned that she didn't mean that. She was talking about something else. There's, you have to give the other person that opportunity to say, oh, maybe I understood you wrong. Maybe I'm getting it wrong. And I don't think, as a culture, we're doing that these days.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode. After 20 years as a serial spiritual entrepreneur, it's my passion to share lessons, insights, and ideas that I picked up along the way. So please subscribe and share if you found any value from today's conversation.